Hello everyone, Mr. E here reporting for Sloptide News Network, your home for all things Dark Tide, Slop, and Space Marine 2. Today we are discussing a recent update with the Space Marine 2 community, a contested health recovery rework. We'll get into exactly what that means, but as I'm certain many of you know, I am not an expert in Space Marine, far from. But that's why I and my journalistic integrity couldn't allow me to go on and talk about this without someone who is on staff. And that's why we have our subsidiary channel here to back us up. First Tour Guardsman. First Tour Guardsman?
Yes, I am a subsidiary of Mr. E. He is our corporate overlord, and I am allegedly knowledgeable in Space Marine 2. Remember we talked about the CHP rework today from the Focus Entertainment poll they put out recently. Now, have you actually read this poll over yet?
Yeah, I did. And so I understand the basics of what is going on because I played about 60 hours of Space Marine 2, and basically for you guys that haven't played Space Marine 2, what is going on here in a really layman's way is there is sort of contested health when you get hurt. You have some health that you can regain, like in Sekiro, where if you deal damage back to enemies, you can recover a portion of the damage that you took. And the balance is between, okay, should you recover more from meleeing enemies and committing and being closer, or from shooting enemies to recover that HP? And that is what the devs want a decision on. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because this is a actual community vote. They put it to a vote within the community. They opened it up, I think, for 2 weeks to have everyone vote on it, and that's the change they're going to make. And I think this is just such a novel way of going about getting a community sentiment, and for better or for worse, it'll produce the result that more people want. What do you think about this? And what was your vote, by the way? Did you vote in this poll?
I said no, only because I am afraid that they might because they did mention in the actual hotfix here, or they might actually have to put out some hotfixes for the game because they'll mess something up if they actually implement the contested health recovery rework, which is kind of worrying to me. I'm cautiously optimistic of the actual balance for the game with CHP recovery change, because basically right now your ranged weapons will restore more HP to you than your melee weapons will. And that's not fundamentally a bad thing, but it can feel really terrible if they were to take away the ranged CHP recovery, which is kind of what they're intending to do here. Because rather than just buffing melee CHP regen in the game, which has been a big issue since the game launched, they're going to be nerfing ranged weapons for their CHP recovery and buffing the melee, which isn't inherently terrible. But the issue comes up in that the way you lose HP in that game is that an enemy will stagger you, and your character will sit in an animation, and you won't be able to get up properly, and by the time you're up, your only option would be to shoot the guy that's now further away from you, and ranged combat already feels really bad. And even though the game's quite casual, you still have an issue of very little counterplay period for ranged combat outside of shoot them back. And if your CHP recovery is very low on ranged weapons, it could feel really bad for the combat loop. And it already feels like the worst part of the combat loop anyways.
Yeah.
So that's my personal opinion and worry on it. That's why I voted no.
So there'd be
I don't think it'd be inherently horrible.
There'd be even less incentive to pull out a ranged weapon if there was more weight put on the recovery from meleeing, is what you're saying?
It's not necessarily that you wouldn't want to take your ranged weapon out ever, but there are times where the only way to get your CHP back versus enemies that will tag you is with a ranged weapon. And if that's lowered, some of the really, really annoying enemies like Devourers in the games shoot effectively a shotgun pellet of ranged damage at you. And that already feels terrible to fight against, and it feels bad with the current CHP recovery system. And if they make the ranged combat even harder and more obnoxious to recover HP on, some of the classes will really, really suffer. And I feel it's just an unfun. It's already not a very good system, to be honest. The CHP recovery system has a ton of problems as it is currently. But nerfing ranged weapons, I've never felt in 2,000 hours of that game
that the ranged weapons were
OP. Too much. There was a discrepancy for sure. But the actual ones that were good, I didn't feel they were busted.
I did see some people in the comments saying that they voted no because the only thing they would have voted for was just buffing the melee contested health recovery, but not nerfing the ranged ones. So maybe that could be something you got behind. But I think, I think that either way, it's important to open these questions up. And this is why I brought this up, because I think that this, when I saw it, I was like, wow, this is such a novel idea to me. And we have questions like this over on the dark side, the dark tide side of things as well, such as the dueling sword. How do we balance the dueling sword, right? And if we put it up to a community poll like this and sort of explain, like, here are the options, this could serve a lot of like usefulness to Fat Shark. Obviously, they are very, very scared to make changes because any negative changes to certain weapons in the past have been met with review bombing and just a lot of hate from parts of the community. But if it's the community that votes and decides the change, then I think they're insulated from that sort of negative effect in a couple ways. One being, if you get an overwhelming or at least a pretty sizable percentage of the population that votes a certain way, those people are going to be satisfied with the outcome, at least initially, until they see the ramifications. And the other part is that, like, they can't blame the devs, for the devs gave everyone the option, and they can blame like other players for not understanding the game, but they're not going to be able to get mad at like Fat Shark directly. Oh my god, you guys nerfed the dueling sword. It's like 60% of people wanted to nerf the dueling sword. So I think that would be a really smart way of going about these changes. What do you think? Do you think it would work for?
I think that is. I definitely agree with you there. Like, it's a good way to basically pass blame onto the game.
I mean, yeah.
A potentially negative change. They did actually say that here in their post that like they could have changed it without asking. They made that very clear, which is kind of a funny flex to me. But
correct, yeah.
Like, we didn't really have to ask you guys at all. But you become so accustomed to this that we're worried that even like a small, potentially positive change could cause a strong negative reaction, which is true because like for both Dark Tide, Space Marine, even Helldivers, any PvE horde shooter, you just have like the word nerf is a bad thing to a lot of people, and like any change can be met with like huge reactions, even if people don't fully understand the implication of the change. But that's why they put it up to a poll, and I think Fat Shark could definitely make more polls for this stuff. But you also get the issue where like Dark Tide is a significantly more complicated game, and changes in that game can have huge ramifications, and not all the players in Dark Tide, really any PvE game, always know like the full inner workings of like what a change really would do to the game. But passing blame with it, I mean, that is not a bad idea.
I think the passing blame is probably the strongest argument towards doing it because like whatever they do, right, when they need to make a change for the balance, for the health of the balance of the game, it's gonna be negative. Changes are almost always perceived as negative, at least by someone is not gonna like it in the outcome, right? I think that the thing that makes me want Fat Shark to do this is because they have a slow time to update. Like, they take a very, very long time to make these update decisions. We can't rely on them to routinely update very, very quickly, which is, if they were doing that, then I don't think players would get as mad about the changes that are made to the game. But if you understand Fat Shark, you understand that if they make a change, if they nerf the dueling sword, nerf the plasma gun, and then players realize that, oh my god, we didn't like this and we have to swing back the other way, it's going to be months. It's going to be months or even a year before that change is remade. So, I think that they need to be very, very careful about making the decision that people are going to be satisfied with, because if they make a decision that people are unsatisfied with or is like in some way broken, they just don't seem to have the production schedule to like get that fixed in a timely manner. So I think that they should be very cautious and around like ideas, because clearly they're talking about weapon balancing. There must be a big weapon balance patch in the near future based on the things they've been saying for Fat Shark and for Dark Tide. And so I think it would be behoove them to be as careful as possible and really, really reach out to the community and see what they feel about it. And certainly there'll be some outspoken voices, and I'll make videos on it and try to rally people to the thing that I want, try to sandbag the vote in my favor. But I think so like votes like this, or just generally more community outreach would be the answer, because clearly players didn't like having the patch notes, the quote unquote leaked patch notes that showed like potential nerfs for the dueling sword and plasma gun. That was met with a huge kerfuffle, because players felt like it was being sneaked in, and they were very, very confused about whether that was actually going live. And I just don't think they like being ambushed in any way.
I feel like when it comes to nerfs in particular, especially in a game like doesn't have everything as a necessarily quote unquote viable option, people like to have they don't mind nerfs as much if suddenly something else is buffed alongside of it.
Hmm.
So that if they up a bunch of other weapons to be pretty strong, maybe not as strong as where like the absolute top tier meta weapons are currently, but like they have more tools to play with, people are more willing to accept it because like not everybody's gonna notice that like okay the dueling sword has like 50 less damage at times, especially if you're playing like Orc Maelstrom or something.
Hmm.
But when it comes to like community outreach, I think that it is good and it is better to like actually make a balanced patch that like properly balances the game and makes more viable builds because that's kind of the whole point. Is you want more viable builds for the content in the game and like builds that aren't going to be like so dominant, which is kind of what you see now in Fat Sharks games. I don't know about it as in Vermintide 2, but in Darktide especially right now, every time I play Havoc 40, it's like it's just Dueling Sword, it's just Plasma. And like
Yeah.
the players that aren't playing those are like 4,000 hour players and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Or like
they
food
can make it work
photography.
outside of the norm. It's gotten a lot better in Vermintide 2 over the years, but there have definitely been eras in Vermintide 2 that I remember that were completely dominated. As a Saltspire player, like there was an era where it was entirely the Falch axe, the Falch in one hand, the axe in the other, that would just like it was completely overtuned. It was a DLC weapon, and then the billhook was overtuned, and I think the rapier is one of the top tier ones now. But they figured it out eventually, and that was through one really big balance patch after another. They called it like the big balance patch and the big balance beta, and I think that's something that I would really like to see in Darktide is they did this thing called the Big Balance Beta for Vermintide 2 where they put out the changes and they went live and they said, okay, let's play, everyone's going to play with these new changes and we'll just sort of see how it looks. And then 3 months later, they finalized it and they went ahead and made some of those changes and then reverted some others and then made some more even further. So I think that that sort of thing would be really, really positive for Darktide to do. I don't think that the right decision is to just like push the balance. just like, okay, here is the way the thing is.
Yeah.
I think that whatever they do, there has to be a openness and a willing to change, to maybe walk back on the change that you made or go further on the change that you made. And that's where it's really important to be in contact with the community. So yeah, I just wanted to bring this up as a potential avenue, something that I thought was really interesting. I've never seen I just like how forthcoming they are with this, and it's very personal too. Like you said before, this is clearly one dev who's typing in here, Dmitry Grigorenko,
Yes, the
who's
game director.
yeah, the game director, literally personally coming in here and saying, I could have adjusted the values at any point over the past year without asking. Like you said, a big
Yeah,
flex.
pretty much. Yeah.
But I worry.
It's pretty on the nose.
Yeah, you've
Sweet.
become so accustomed to the current state that even a small positive change can cause a strong negative reaction, right? If we went ahead and tweaked the dueling sword to be more balanced and have other weapons be positive, people who are like really, really love that as their favorite weapon are gonna be really, really upset. They're gonna review bomb the game. So it's good to get like a good sentiment around it. And I think this is a great way about it. So, any last
I do
words?
feel like if they do, I use final words here. The thing about
Good.
the thing with the dueling sword is that if they do actually nerf the dueling sword, I have a feeling it'll come after a class rework for the perk trees.
Mhm.
Because I get the sense that like there's some overhaul coming out to enemies, like end game difficulty, because the way the Arbites is, the way the Ogren is right now, it is kind of like they're so far, their perk trees are so far above the other classes. And
Yeah.
by the time they actually nerf the dueling sword, I imagine the other classes that have the dueling sword right now will be brought up to that level. Because Arbites and Ogren, they kind of seems like the intended balance for the classes right now. They're definitely overtuned for the current content in the game, and they might always be, to be honest. But like most players also aren't playing on Havoc 40, and it's pretty clear to me like that Fat Shark for the most part is balancing for like the majority of players rather than like the absolute top. Though honestly, they do a pretty good job of like balancing around some pretty niche modes. So we'll see what they actually do when it comes to the dueling sword later. But I imagine if a nerf does come in for the most busted weapons in the game currently, you're probably going to see them buff a ton of other stuff on the side, and primarily the classes are kind of lacking
Yeah.
and carried by these weapons.
I definitely agree. I have this sort of pegged in my mind as when we see the dueling sword and the plasma gun reworks slash nerfs, that will be whenever they do the veteran rework, because they're not going to take away the veteran's plasma gun, his strongest weapon, and one of the only things that's keeping him viable when his talent tree is in the shape that it's in. So if they give him a bunch of other weapons, if they make the Hellbore las guns and Recon las guns and the regular las, all those things way, way better, and give him a ton of other options, and then at the same time tune it down and boost the base power level of the class by changing the talent tree, that would probably go over relatively smoothly, because people will have more stuff to play with, and they'll be able to find new OP stuff to abuse rather than just sticking to the old plasma gun. So that's sort of what I've been thinking is, if we do take an L on some of these really powerful things, there's going to be a lot of W's, right? They're going to be, and if we look at the near past and we look at the Ogren and we look at the Arbites, we've seen a ton of W's in terms of player power. So I wouldn't be too scared about losing out overall. It seems like we're creeping up and up and up. So if you're looking for more powerful builds, that's definitely in the future. But that's all I have to say today, guys. And thank you again for Tour Guardsman for joining us and giving your insight. And yeah, go check out his channel and support our subsidiaries. All right, till next time, guys. Mr. E out.